Pardon me for the interruption. Okay, most of this stuff that I heard as a child was related to me by my grandmother and her sisters, and my relatives, my cousins, when I went down south from Baltimore to South Carolina. These stories were passed on to me also by my older cousins who had still lived in the South. My mother was a pretty, oh, sorry, pardon me. Okay, let's get this together now. I don't want to be, okay. My mother's mother, my grandmother, was a pretty, petite little old lady with a big heart and a lot of class and style. Yes, she did, Lizzie Lee. God bless you. Rest in peace. Grandma didn't take any mess from anyone, and everyone in our family, aunts, uncles, and all my cousins, had the biggest respect for her. Grandma had experienced a lot of life and had a lot of understanding and wisdom. She was sweet and kind, but she also had a temper that no one dared give defiance to. When Grandma really got mad, everyone became quiet. Her, okay, pardon me. And then they would leave her presence. The few times as a child I witnessed Grandma get angry or raise her voice at my mother, Mom never raised her voice back or gave any back talk or smart talk. The most Mom would say is, I don't agree with you. You have the right to your opinion. And then she would say, I'm going home. I'm leaving. Let's go, kids. As a child, my mother used to take me and my sister Candy to Grandma's house almost every weekend. As I grew a little older, I realized it wasn't just because my two older half-sisters, Maytoy and Jean, lived with Grandma and she helped raise them. I realized that my mother and her mother had a very close relationship, and they were really good friends, even though Grandma was the boss. At 16 years of age, I viewed Grandma as being a cool and hip old lady. My mother's father, Grandma's first husband, was named Sam Swinney. My mother and some family members say I look a lot like him. He was a farm boy who became a big-time hustler and black gangster in North Carolina. I seen old photos of him in the family album. He was a big, handsome, brown-skinned man. In all the photos I seen of him, he was wearing very nice suits with shirts and ties, never dressed in jeans or farm clothes. Everything looked very expensive for that time, especially the cars that he would take pictures in or standing next to with a few of his crew. And the photos of Grandma with him, she looked like she was in her early 20s in one of the photos. She was wearing a full-length mink coat and hat on a matching mink hat. There was also other old photos my mother had of her father, taken in the early 30s. Sam Swinney is standing in front of a big new car that looked like a classic Cadillac. He is suited down and surrounded by two large black men also wearing suits and ties. On the other side of them are pretty black women who were dressed very well. One of his friends had his hand in his side like that, holding what appeared to be a pearl-handled .45. They were some fly, serious black men in those days and time. And they pictures, everyone represented money and power. Grandma came from a big and tough, close family, and the word I got as a kid from family members is that Grandma, Lizzie Lee, didn't take any mess from Sam Swinney either. She didn't care anything about his size or him becoming a big-time black gangster. When he made her mad, she would pick up something in a heartbeat and bust him in the head. Her favorite weapons were said to be big wooden sticks and iron frying pans. Then she would take my mother, her only child, and leave and stay at one of her sisters or brothers' houses. Most of the time, Grandma used to get upset or be angry at Sam Swinney for being around or being with other women. This went on for several years, from what I heard from the family. Finally, Grandma took her daughter, my mother, Mary Frances Swinney, and moved to Baltimore, Maryland. Grandma divorced Sam Swinney, and he died sometime after that in some kind of accident a few years later. In Baltimore, Grandma met Morris Ambrose. He was an up-and-coming professional gambler. She dated him for years but refused to marry him. Decades later, after they moved and both came up to New York City, Grandma finally married Morris. I was about 10 or 11 years old when they got married. Morris had become a big-time numbers banker in New York City. Everyone in the family knew how he earned his living. He was respected and it was accepted. As long as I can remember, Morris always wore a big diamond ring and a watch with diamonds all over it. Morris paid for my older sister, Jean, to go to college for over 4 years. And when Jean graduated from Hunter College in 1961 with her bachelor's degree in nursing, Morris gave her a 7-day trip to the Bahamas as a graduation present. And all this was before he had married my grandmother. I never heard Morris talk much. He seemed to be a man of action and few words. Whenever he was at the house with Grandma, I always saw him reading or writing something. He kept pockets full of money and would always give me and my younger sister Candy cash whenever he saw us. Without us ever asking him for money or anything, Morris, most of the time, would give me a $20 bill. And a lot of times, he wasn't there when we came by to visit Grandma. Sometimes he would be gone for weeks, even months at a time. I found out he loved the horses and would travel to racetracks all over the north and south of the East Coast. And once or twice a year, he would go to Vegas and gamble with high stakes. He was a very well known and respected man in the underworld. Morris Ambrose had once been closely affiliated with Bumpy Johnson. This is facts. An infamous black gangster and big-time numbers man who took control of the numbers racket in Harlem from the mafia in the 1930s and controlled it for decades. When Bumpy went to jail, that's when Morris went on his own and started hustling with the horses and high-stakes gambling. As I walked down the block of Rutland Road to my grandmother's house, I had 2 plans in mind. Plan A was I intended to hide most of my cash there without her or anyone knowing about it. Plan B was if Plan A couldn't work, I would just tell Grandma I ripped off the cash and ask her to stash at least 10 or 20 grand for me while I went away for a few months. As I came near the end of the block, I saw Grandma sitting on the stoop of the large brownstone house. When she saw me, she stood up and smiled and waved at me. I ran up the stairs and kissed and hugged her. Then I followed her inside the house and up the stairs to the top floor. Grandma was wearing her house coat and scarf on her head. She told me she was doing house cleaning when I called. She asked me why I wasn't in school and what was I doing in Brooklyn by myself at this time of day. I told her that I didn't have any school that day. She questioned me about it, and of course, she knew that my story didn't add up. I explained a little more to her about Harlem Prep, the school that I was in, and that I was just getting used to it, but I wasn't really comfortable about it. And its structure was like a college. Grandma asked me what did I have in these big shopping bags, and I wanted to tell her that I had shopping bags full of cash, but I thought to myself, I wouldn't be the better thing to do. Plan A first. So I just told Grandma that I had a bunch of papers that I had to take care of with the Black Panther Party. Grandma asked me did I want her to fix me something to eat, and the first thought that popped in my mind was her delicious home-cooked sweet potato pie, and I agreed. And I also realized that that would give me time to stash some of the money in the front room or either in one of my sister's rooms. So far, so good. I'm going to conclude here, and I'll get back more with this story. This is, this is just a smooth ride. Pretty soon, we're going to go to the next chapter, which is called The Jackson 5 and the FBI. That's right. The Jackson 5 singing and the FBI coming for me. Okay, so it's about to get a little bit hectic, and I'm about to do some things. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this little reading this evening, and with all my brothers, my sisters, my beloved people around the world, okay, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, okay, in Australia, okay, in the Antarctica, all around this globe, which belongs to the human beings. I say, Salam Alaikum, peace be with you, and power to the people. And I hope that everybody is in the grace and mercy of the Creator. Amen.